The Lambton County Courthouse and Jail has seen its last days. Soon to be torn down to make way for a motel, this building has been the home of justice here in Sarnia for the last 109 years. When the northerly half of the District of Kent was separated and designated as the County of Lambton in 1849, the county seat was established at Port Sarnia, the largest town in the new county. A local stonemason by the name of Alexander Mackenzie, the same man who helped establish the first Lambton Shield in 1852, and the man who would become Canada's second Prime Minister in 1873, was contracted to build a new courthouse and jail for Lambton County. The one he built was of fieldstone, 4 stories in height with a walled yard behind. The many thousands of criminal cases tried here in the Sarnia Assizes over 109 years resulted in just 3 executions, 2 men and 1 woman, all by hanging in the yard of the jail. The first was executed on the 5th day of December in 1862, when a man by the name of Thomas Cleary, convicted of the fatal stabbing of one Edward Burke on March 17, 1862, was hanged. That morning, when the executioner in a calm voice told him, "Thomas Cleary, all is ready, I must continue," the man insisted that he had not killed Burke, but that the alcohol he had consumed was the culprit. But there was no reprieve. The bolt was drawn, the door under Cleary's feet dropped away, but the rope was too thick. The drop of 10 feet only partially dislocated his neck. More than 400 spectators had to watch for several minutes as Cleary's body shook as he struggled, shaking and turning. This went on until his body seemed to relax and suddenly became still. Thomas Cleary's body was claimed an hour later by a priest and a few friends, who had remained convinced that he was innocent. They took his remains to a nearby house, where his body was prepared and later moved to the Catholic cemetery to be buried. The second to hang in the Sarnia jail was a woman, Elizabeth Workman, convicted 11 years later in March of 1873 for killing her abusive husband the previous September. Even though the jury in this case strongly recommended mercy, the judge ruled that she must die by execution to take place on 19 June 1873. In the intervening months, more than 1,500 signatures were gathered on petitions. As well, several letters and telegrams were written, including a hand-delivered written request for clemency by Alexander Mackenzie, then Member of Parliament for the Sarnia-Lambton riding. He delivered this letter to Prime Minister John A. Macdonald. But all of these efforts to get this woman's sentence commuted were to no avail. She was hanged on June 19th. Following her execution, her body was allowed to fall into a hole already dug beneath the scaffold. Her remains are still there, soon to be topped by the asphalt of a parking lot behind a motel on Christina Street. The third and final execution at the Sarnia jail saw as its victim one Stephen Kiosh, who was hanged in 1941 for the murder of Jerry Blackbird. A native resident of Walpole Island, Kiosh had previously been convicted of murder and sentenced to death back in 1912, only to be acquitted by a new trial when the key witness, who would immediately after the trial become his wife, altered her testimony in his favor. Following the murder on August 17, 1940 of Jerry Blackbird, it was learned that this same wife and Jerry Blackbird had been in an intimate relationship. Under the influence of alcohol, after brutally taking the life of Blackbird, Courthouse removed his body to his boat, wrapped it in chains, and dumped it over the side out in the middle of the St. Clair River. Convicted of the crime, he was first sentenced to hang November 26, 1940. Just before the hanging was to take place, he was granted an appeal. But that didn't help. Stephen Courthouse was hanged in the jail yard shortly after midnight on January 8, 1941. Following pronouncement of death, his body was removed under police guard to Walpole Island for burial. 3 hangings over 109 years, 2 bodies removed for proper burial, but one remains below the ground in the old jail yard, soon to be covered by a parking lot with no reminder that this woman ever lived.